talking about Blue Oyster Cult here.
Okay, I'm looking for some...
Classic rock. One of the most influential songs. This is really important stuff you're witnessing here. This is one of the most influential classic rock bands and songs, Blue Oyster Cult. Blue Oyster.
Oyster, but you have to be okay.
All right, prepare to be blown away. Some enchanted evening.
If YouTube will work, because
All right, you're about to witness some good rock and roll.
turn on the no, we have to wait.
Loading. Come on. All right, here we go. 5, 4, 3,
Why we have to wait so long?
2, come on. 1. Dang it, I picked the video that has this.
I know the song.
Come on. Hear the reaper. Summer rain, we can be like they are. Come on, baby. Hear the reaper. Take my hand. Don't fear the reaper. Why don't fear the reaper?
I know the song, but it wasn't so popular in Poland.
Really?
Really?
This is like epic
Really?
and classic rock. I thought Poland would dig this one.
No.
It's like about rock and roll. Don't fear the reaper.
What year is it? I think it's quite old.
Okay, here it goes. Oh, there's a good guitar solo coming up. It's gonna be epic. It's like everything classic rock's about, like don't fear the reaper, limitlessness, freedom, spirituality, adventure, romance, and Juliet together in eternity. Romeo and Juliet, men and women every day. Juliet and men and women every day, like they are every day. They are being baby and the reaper. It's about romance, not fearing the reaper. Romeo and Juliet, everything good rock and roll should be.
I think even American fans will enjoy this video because it's not often when fighters sing songs and so on.
Well, it's all interconnected. Every day is a new day of adventure and limitless potential to...
Proszę?
Guitar solo.
And do you play
Such
guitar
an
or?
epic. I play classical guitar. Ah, man, that's so beautiful and epic. It's all interconnected. Flowing on music, one chord or note to the next on guitar, bending the strings, flowing one submission to the next in jiu-jitsu, bending the arms and chokes, one combo to the next in stand-up, one scripture to the next in the Bible, one subatomic particle to the next in string theory, Romeo and Juliet, don't fear the reaper, rest in peace's limits, by the Great Spirit's grace and limitless potential.
And I've got to ask you another one. When when you are on the bottom in your fights and you fight from the half guard with one leg to the rubber guard, I think. What's your goal? To what submission are you looking for, or taking the back, or
Okay.
you are bottom half guard, and yes, and you are going to the like for the gogoplata, I
I
think.
want this underhook if I can get it.
Uh-huh.
From here, I got a lot of stuff I can go to. I can try to reverse the position.
Yes, but you are using your leg.
Go back to here.
Nice.
Like this.
Okay, but I mean when you are, I cannot show this, but when you are in the half guard and you are putting your leg before his face.
This is when I messed up. Give me this. Give me this.
Okay.
This is when I messed up. I want this underhook.
It's
But if
only
I miss the underhook, then I gotta get the pimp Armstrong like Master Eddie teaches. I gotta lock this down so he doesn't move anywhere. And then I gotta get this to control the distance, right?
Okay.
Now from here, I can control the distance. I can go here and set up my meat hook.
Nice.
Now from here, my leg's still stuck, but I can pry it out freely. I can set up the triangle, or I can quickly flow into the Kung Fu, into the Omoplata.
Oh, nice.
Or I can go for a swim move. Give me. This.
Nice.
So there's a number of things you can do.
Nice technique. I think technique of the week.
Like flowing one chord or note to the next, one submission to the next. Ready?
Yes, it's on.
All right, this is my really good friend, Danny Lahner, one of my favorite artists in the world. He does the Underworld soundtrack. And he played for Nine Inch Nails, and it's been one of my blessings of MMA to get to be friends with a lot of the musicians I look up to. So this is the song of the day. Danny Lahner does this remix for the Underworld soundtrack, and it's with David Bowie, one of the greatest artists of all time as well, and eccentric artists, and of course Maynard, another one of the most eccentric, beautiful artists, free thinkers of all time. The song's called Disco King from the Underworld soundtrack. And he adds a really nice touch on it. He makes it like more dark and melodic, and
I will show the title for the guys.
all right, prepare for some good rock and roll. This is gonna be epic. As soon as it plays, this is gonna be epic.
Oh, we will cut the breaks.
Sounds kind of like something the Polish would dig. It's got kind of that dark, beautiful, artistic touch to it. Oh, brother. Taking forever to learn.
Are you from Poland? Yeah.
It really kicks in. He adds like this dark touch at the beginning, but it really kicks in when Maynard and David Bowie start singing. I mean, any fighter or athlete gets a lot of inspiration and emotion from the music and the musicians that have touched all of our lives, whether it's Ronnie James Dio, Danny Lahner, David Bowie. And it's in our nature to want to set the bar higher as human beings, whether it's inspiring people with music, inspiring people as an athlete to be more open-minded and live as one, and spiritually and intellectually.
And tell me, how are you putting this bar higher? By jiu-jitsu and MMA, or you are focusing also on other things?
Well, I'm focusing on growing as an artist. I would like to do some acting like a lot of the fighters are doing, and some creative writing. I mean, one of the blessings of MMA is I've got to be good friends with a lot of the musicians I look up to, like Danny Lahner and Tim the Ripper Owens, one of the most powerful voices in metal. He's actually singing for the Dio disciples, and God bless to Ronnie James Dio, rest in peace, the most powerful voice in metal. I mean, he touched so many of our lives, and the Dio Disciples is such a great celebration because everyone's there to celebrate what a big impact Dio had on our lives, and he was such a nice person. They say if he met you at the bar 10 years ago, he'd remember your name, and he's like such a legend. He's touched so many people's lives. I like to listen to his music, and I get so inspired, like it brings tears to my eyes. I want to and do more cardio, push harder. And, I think Dio, he's had that impact on all these people's lives that are here are at the Dio Disciples concert. And just if you think about all the great artists and athletes and how big of an impact they had, and the limitless potential that God gave us all to tap into to inspire each other. And it's such a beautiful and majestic thing. So I would like to just grow as an artist from MMA and have the chance to get into acting and maybe jam with the musicians that I like and write some poetry about the multiverse and artistic freedom and spirituality and just tap into the fullest potential God gave us all. Every day's a new day of adventure and limitless potential to tap into. And it's cool to entertain the possibility that maybe we could all become an evolved human race where we'd all be successful and everybody could live out all their dreams. And is it possible that we wouldn't need money to motivate us? Like we could become more of an evolved human race and we'd have like robots do the shit jobs no one wants to do, and we'd all just tap into God's limitless potential and be artistic and free and serve each other and inspire each other by doing our gift from God and what we like doing, whether it's being a fighter, being a writer or artist or all of the above. It's all interconnected.
So
What do you guys think? You think it's possible? It seems to me like we're all waste so much time worrying about the economy and money. How great would it be if we could all just be successful and tap into our limitless potential God gives us and be an evolved race where we could explore the universe and have the science and the Large Hadron Colliders in CERN and the Hubble telescope discovering things and people doing their jobs working on the Hubble telescopes and the Hadron Colliders and the beautiful music that Danny Lahner and Tim the Ripper Owens do, and just because that's what they like doing, and we could all just live good and live happily ever after. I mean, that's got to be a possibility without money. Everyone fears communism, but and I'm not advocating it. I'm just entertaining the possibility. I mean, could we be happy without money?
Here in Poland, we had communism. And it wasn't so nice.
It wasn't so fucking good, was
But
it?
the idea was great. Yes.
Well, what if we had robots wash the dishes, do the jobs no one wants to do, and we all just hung out and philosophized like this and shared our ideas?
But now we've got the wife.
Yeah, we gotta make money.
Yeah, I guess money is a motivator to get people to do their jobs, but people are going to want to do their jobs that enjoy what they do anyway. Is it possible that people could do what they enjoy doing and they could have their house provided for it, their food? We could all grow like healthy oaks and stuff and eat them, and we could all like live as one and by God's grace and just be free and have like robots washing the dishes, robots doing the police work and the military work. I mean, at least the robots would be non-biased.
You want to say, and we don't have the police army. Yes.
Yeah. Well, if we had robots, like our technology is increasing so much. We got like the Large Hadron Collider in CERN discovering the Higgs particle, that's the God particle that allows everything to come out of the void into existence. We got the gene therapy research and we got the possibility of quantum computing, where we're going to have billions and billions of times more powerful supercomputers by using particle entanglement, where you send two photons through a crystal and they form a bond of entanglement. And if you interrupt the spin of one, the other one knows faster than the speed of light. So by using that for computers, it'd be like billions and billions of times stronger computers. So once we tap into all that potential, is it possible that we could evolve so much as a human race that we could have computers organized like the military and the police, and we could all just become more educated and tap into our limitless potential as athletes and artists and intellectuals and people working to keep the Hubble going and the Large Hadron Colliders and build better ones. I mean, it's a possibility worth entertaining, but would we still need money? Or could we just all live as one and just grow healthy elk to eat and healthy organic vegetables and do our fights and do our music and creative expression and philosophy and have our Hubbles and Hadron Colliders and discover new things about our beautiful universe?
Yes, but only in situation when everybody thinks like that, yes. Because all the time somebody wants to have more money than other people.
Yeah.
And every time somebody like this, yes.
Well, we all want to be successful and have money. I mean, money I see like it could be a vehicle to do a lot of good for orphans, and you have a lot more power to influence people when you have money for making the world a better place, it seems like. Kind of like changing the system from within. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to talk to someone who's really knowledgeable about politics and see if they would, be cool to talk to Ron Paul about this and see if he thinks it's possible that we could become an evolved human race where we'd have like our supercomputers and our gene therapy and stem cell research and everything all come to fruition, where we'd have the artistic freedom, where we wouldn't need money to motivate us and we could all eat good and live good and be athletes and artists. And I mean, it's a possibility, definitely worth entertaining.
Yes, and last one, because your teacher Eddie Bravo often advises some thinks that some drugs are good for your creativity, and there is a problem because there is no good research about this. And what do you think about things like psychedelics and so on? Because
well, what I think about psychedelics and everything is it's great if you can have the spiritual enlightenment where you don't need any drugs or anything and you're just addicted to training and good habits and positive choices, because everything's a drug. Stress is a drug. Some people get addicted to stress and being mad at traffic and being mad at people in line because they're addicted to the drug that it makes in their body and the neural network patterns and neuroreceptors. And some people get addicted to happiness and training and the runner's high and feeling good and healthy and good spirituality and the drug that makes within our body of the neuroreceptors in our brain and pituitary gland and hormones and endorphins and neuroreceptors and the natural drug that it's producing in our body. So we can evolve our brains and bodies not to need any drugs and just to be naturally addicted to the spiritual high of good training and good spirituality and good mental stimulation from philosophy and spirituality, and be enlightened enough not to need any drugs. But that being said, I think that marijuana or weed, whatever you call it in Poland, should be legal, because alcohol does way more damage than pot or weed or whatever it's called in Poland. I mean, if you look at the liver failures from alcohol, the drunk driving accidents, the people dying and killing themselves from over drinking too much.
People are aggressive after drinking, yes.
The people drinking and getting in fights, and people smoke weed, they're not going to go try to start a fight. They're going to go watch TV and eat Twinkies or something.
They even will drive a car slower.
Yeah. Oh, that could be a pain in the ass to people waiting behind them, but it's better than people killing an innocent family, driving drunk Or I've had friends from alcoholic families where the parents just drink alcohol, they lose their house, they kill their liver, and it's way worse for you than weed. I mean, it is totally ridiculous to think that Michael Phelps having a picture of him with a bong at a party is a worse influence for kids than him having a drink of hard alcohol at a party.
But no-
It's ridiculous how hard alcohol is totally condoned and acceptable, but heaven forbid a guy wants to smoke weed to chill out after work.
But I think that marijuana is legal in
It is. We are making
LA, I think, and
with a medical prescription.
yes, but
You can get a medical prescription easily. It's completely legal in
Colorado is
California.
legal.
And I'm glad to see that we're making some progress towards that because freedom of choice is God-given. And I think we should legalize weed. We should legalize gay marriages. Even though as a Christian, I don't think that the churches should be forced to partake in gay marriage if that's not what they believe in. But everybody should have the God-given freedom of choice in this beautiful universe. And in the beautiful countries that are blessed enough to be free, Poland, America, Canada, England, Europe. And we can all really tap into our potential to evolve as a human race by God's grace. And so if we legalize weed, that could be good for the economy. There's people that say it's a gateway drug. Now, I'm not anyway advocating that people should smoke weed. It's better if you can be on a natural high and be enlightened enough not to need anything and just be addicted to training and positive choices. But weed is a healthier choice than alcohol. And so if we make progress towards evolving as a human race, legalizing weed, alcohol is more of a gateway drug than weed. Anyone with any real street experience knows. You're much more likely to try cocaine or heroin when you're all fucked up on alcohol, not knowing what you're doing, than when if you smoked a little bit of reefer. That's just common sense. Anyone on the streets knows. It's not more of a gateway drug than alcohol. Alcohol is the biggest gateway drug. So with that being said, I believe that we should legalize weed. I'm pro-life because I don't think abortion is a natural thing. You don't see lions and tigers and bears having abortions. So, I mean, I say give the kids a chance and I respect the life and everything. And that's my opinion on it. I say legalize weed, legalize gay marriage. I'm pro-life on that. I think it's you can make an exception if it's a rape victim or whatever. But that's my political views for anyone that's interested. I mean, it's always the dumb leading the dumb, arguing about stupid things. Like, go ahead and have abortion, but don't use stem cell research to save lives, because that's playing God, and we can't do that. If you're going to allow abortion, you might as well allow the stem cells to be used to save lives so the babies aren't dying for nothing. But now they don't need that because they're able to reprogram our regular cells into embryonic stem cells, thank God. And so God's really blessed our science and technology, and it truly is a great and blessed time to live in. And there's so much potential by God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit's grace to do great things and come together as one and tap into our fullest potential as artists and athletes and free thinkers and free spirits. And it's a beautiful thing. We're all one beautiful multiverse family. Us and the river dolphins and a supernova 14 billion light years away, and the musicians and artists and actors and photographers and fans and writers, and it's a beautiful thing, awesome experience.
What do you think?